So hello and welcome to Navigating the Toughest Issues in Education, led by Brad Gustafson and Bill Ziegler.
Woo!
Before we get started,
Bring it.
just a couple of words about Walden University, who's collaborating with us on this webinar. Designed to help educators seek a better way to pursue advanced degrees, Walden is an accredited university that offers a variety of programs, from teacher preparation to doctoral degrees that connect educators with nationally recognized education experts, policymakers, and scholar practitioners who are driving change and influence the future of education. For more information about their courses and services, stay tuned until the end of the session and you'll get some information then. Now on to the webinar. I'd like to pass our virtual microphone to Nicole Franks, who will present Brad and Bill.
Nicole!
Nicole!
Oh, that was a great introduction for me. Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. It's with excitement that I actually introduce to you today our two webinar presenters, Dr. Brad Gustafson and Dr. Bill Ziegler. Brad is an elementary school principal in Minnesota, if you can't tell that from his accent.
Oh, come on, Nicole. Come on, Nicole.
He's earned recognition as a national distinguished principal and is the author of the best-selling book, Renegade Leadership. He serves as an advisor with Future Ready Schools and was recognized as an NSBA 20 to watch for his innovative leadership. Brad co-hosts a popular education podcast called Unearthed. If you don't already, be sure to follow him on Twitter at GustafsonBrad to continue the conversation and learn more through his blog at bradgustafson.com. You can find those spelled out in the chat window off to the right side of your screen. Bill is a high school principal in Pennsylvania, and you will also notice that from his accent. He was honored as the 2016 Pennsylvania Principal of the Year, the 2015 National Association of Secondary School Principals Digital Award winner, and was selected to serve on the United States team of school leaders to the Great Leaders Summit in China. Bill presents regularly around the world on school leadership. Connect with Bill today and after the webinar at chaselearning.org and on Twitter at Dr. Bill Ziegler. In today's webinar, these two award-winning principals will square off for you on some of the biggest problems facing school leaders that we're experiencing in education today. They'll share strategies to amplify learning and help you apply positive deviance to break through the barriers that you may be facing. And now, entering the ring, Brad and Bill.
Good Rocky song from being from Philadelphia. It's in the ring. The gloves are off. I'm Rocky. Who are you, Brad?
Who's Rocky's teammate? I thought we were on the same team with.
Oh, that's Apollo Creed.
I
That's
showed
right.
up.
You're Apollo Creed.
You're swinging. All this stuff. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. How you doing, Brad?
This is gonna be fun. I'm excited. Should we just dive in, or should we?
Let's dive in.
You know, brewing.
And when we look at some of the toughest issues in education, let's just jump to the first one here.
Yeah, hold on. I got a question though. So before we dive in, I just want to encourage everyone listening to think about maybe what your biggest barrier to innovation or meaningful change might be, and just get that in your head and see if you're right. Just kidding. That's not how it works. But I would bet money, because as Bill and I connect and listen to educators just in different parts around the country, it's fascinating the similarities. You know. And we have some topics today that we're going to unpack and give some actionable takeaways for, and how you relate to those will be different than your counterpart, because your counterpart will have different students, different schools, different contexts, but there are some similarities here. So I'm excited by that.
Let's get started, Brad. Let's jump right into it.
Let's do it.
Dealing with resistant staff. It can be a difficult thing as a principal. Come on, we have that. No, and I think that it's a problem that many school leaders will face throughout their career. I mean, I've been a principal for many years. Don't you think it's a problem coming up for school leaders?
Right, and I hear from educators too, where they are aware of colleagues who they're feeling are difficult or resistant to change too. So I think regardless of your role and how you're serving kids, we probably all can think of one person who maybe isn't moving as fast as we might hope they might move, or they're just not quite as cooperative as we might hope. So what do you do about that, Bill?
Yeah, I think, first of all, here, don't take it personally as a school leader. I mean, you can't let these things stick. But the other thing you have to do is you have to treat your most resistant, struggling staff member treat them as they were your best staff member. Treat everybody equally. Treat them with kindness. Just shower them with love. Let them know that you're here to support
Bill,
them.
I gotta push back a hair, because even in myself, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, don't take it personal. Sometimes it's really personal, right?
It is
sounds
personal.
good. What you're saying sounds good, but how do we do that? I mean, realistically, if it's feeling deeply personal, how do you not take it personal? You got a story for us, Bill?
Well, I do. I can think of several stories, and one of them is, I had to tell a teacher to do something a few years back when I was a principal at a middle school, and I had a teacher in my office, and they were resistant to change, and I mean, breaking down in tears, and just trying. A few things that I did was, number one, don't engage in the argument. Don't engage in it. Once you engage in the argument, I think you begin to lose. Number two, set clear standards of what is expected in the school, and show why they do it. I think the other thing is to find a colleague that you can talk it out to. I know for me, that helped me not to take it home, because if I take it home, it's taking it personally. And that's when I really start to feel defeated. And then I think the last thing is to talk about kids and really keep coming back to what you want in your school and what it's all about, kids. And Brad, how do you deal with that? I mean, what are some ways you deal with it?
Well, I know how I used to deal with it, and I know how I deal with it now. I'll just go back. I briefly touch on this in the book, but I use this railroad analogy to, school, I feel like, has two bars or tracks. One of them is traditional best practices and research and what we know is best for kids, and probably a lot of it will always be best for kids. And you can probably think of some of those things like building relationships. That's never going to go out of style. But then you have this other track, or the parallel to that, and that's the change. And that's the hard part. And for me, how I used to handle it, I think I probably erred or favored on the side of innovation and seeking what was different to try to have student learning be more relevant for the kiddos and people I was serving. The problem, Bill, and my biggest mistake was that I was disenfranchising that other rail. So the people doing the traditional, really important work, when they're not feeling valued, for example, when we label them resistant, they're probably not feeling valued. That's a really big problem. Train tracks work together, and when we can have people going in a similar or same direction, honoring the past and the present and the important work that'll always need to happen, while also keeping an eye out for what do our students need us to be asking and trying and looking for, then things really start to click a little bit. And people might be asking, well, how realistically do you do that? And for me personally now, here's the kind of the little bit that I've learned over time. It's looking for value and taking an interest and really practicing what we preach. So just like we would want to know what kids are really good at and what their passions are, if there's a staff member who seems resistant, I mean, most people don't wake up wanting to have that label. If anything, they're probably saying, my principal is a jerk, or my principal does not care about what I'm doing, right? The label could go both ways. My principal is resistant to best practice. He's always wanting to try something new. But if we can honor where they're coming from, I think we have a much better chance of going where our kids need us to go together.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. And I think one of the things when I talk about honoring them in the way of treating them, the resistant staff, as your best staff, it values them, it honors them, and it recognizes them. But the other piece to it is that I love what you talked about, how getting to know them, building a relationship with them. But there's also a point where you got to set those standards, where you got to say, listen, this is minimum expectations in our building. This is what we expect from everybody. And here's the other piece too. There's never we cannot allow resistant staff do anything that would hurt or harm kids. And I'm not talking about like going out and physically hurting them, but just holding them back, or having some old ways in how they talk to kids that are disrespectful. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, I think, but just being respectful. And I think having no tolerance for that and making that message out there that it's all about kids and focusing on the kids is so important.
Right. I think that the biggest thing for leadership is if a resistant staff member kind of kept to themselves and just needed to progress a little bit slower or just with different information, we could probably handle it. Where it gets really tricky and dicey and personal is that when they try to increase their sphere of influence, and it might not be the best direction or tempo or tone for kids. It might be in direct conflict with the values of the school, for example, and it might get political. I mean, before I became a principal, I didn't really realize how political leadership was, and I'm still learning. But that's where it gets a little bit dicey. So what are some ways to, I heard you say, treat them like your best staff. Help me understand what that might look or sound like. You got an example?
So I do. I have several examples. The first thing is to honor them in front of other people. Don't talk about them negatively. Don't run them down in the staff. You need to honor them when you talk to other people, and you need to treat them with kindness. The second piece is when you're with them, you want to be communicating positively, that you're there to support them, that you're there to grow them, that you're there to come alongside them, and even try to see what resources can you give them that they may not have, that they can help to be successful. I'm thinking about, we went to be a one-to-one about 5 years ago in our school. And I remember just some teachers going, you know what, computers are great, but you know what, we've been doing paper and pencil for the entire lifetime of our school, and we don't need this. And I said, listen, what's best for kids? And that's where I keep coming back to that conversation. And then we put minimum expectations in it. This is what we expect from everyone. And then we build and grow on it. And we really try to work. When I talk about honoring that person, it's about finding their strengths, finding their passions, and beginning to explore that in a way and grow that in a way I think that will develop. But it's about, here's something we can get sucked into as school leaders, is talking negatively about them, not just privately, but even inside the school. And that's toxic. And the last thing that we need to do is buy into the toxicity that's going on in the school, maybe around this person or around some other people. It's time that we honor them in the way, the golden rule, right? Treat them as you want to be treated, I think.
Yeah, one of our friends, Jimmy Casas, says just eradicate the word they from your vernacular, your vocab. It's pretty powerful. You know, don't blame the district. Don't blame teachers or principals or colleagues or anyone. It just needs to be more we. And if you really pay attention to how much you use the word they, you can do a heart change.
I have a question that came in.
Fire, Jeff, have I mentioned how awesome your voice is amazing?
Thank you. So here's the question. How do you deal with staff that state, you know, we've already done it that way in the past? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting. That comes up a lot. I think there's even a thing, the way we've always done it, or TWADI, if that's the right acronym. For me personally, I always say model, don't mandate. So instead of trying to convince someone to do something differently, I always just try to model it and lead it and show the value. And then a lot of times that becomes contagious. Here's a quick example of the modeling thing, because I think sometimes stories and examples bring this work to life. So for example, connecting with teachers that maybe we haven't connected with on as deep a level as we would like, and we know that maybe something's missing from the relationship, but calling, for example, and actually I think I got this idea from Jimmy too. He calls new teachers, and in addition to doing that, calling more established teachers and their parents, and just bopping in on their classroom, learning, seeing the really great work, the authentic best practice work they're doing, and then having a conversation with their mom or dad about the value you see in them. And it's all authentic, but it's an investment. And the reason that I connected it to what you just asked, or what someone in the audience asked, Jeff, is that's not the way I've always done it, but making those personal phone calls home to staff members, parents, that kind of models change and a different mindset. And if there's someone that is seeing me as resistant, like if the roles were reversed and then they started investing in me and my family and genuinely caring, the relational dynamic, you better believe I'm going to be less resistant, right? I'm going to be more open and being like, are you kidding me? This is awesome. And it's different than how it's always been done.
Yeah, and I think Jeff, building on that piece, I think about modeling, right? I need to be modeling the attitude that I want to see in our teachers, and I need to be modeling the work ethic and what we need to do. I think the other piece is innovation. I think as school leaders, sometimes innovation can come up against resistant staff. And what we need to do is we need to show them how this innovation is going to be effective and work to move students forward toward growth. And really, I think that needs to be our focus. How do we grow students? How do we make students better? How do we make them stronger? And modeling that and putting things into place to do that and make it successful is really key. Any other questions, Jeff?
No, not right now. I'll let you move on.
Bill, awesome. What's another question or barrier that you've heard educators and school leaders come up against? Wow,
Right
you're like a mind reader.
Brad, I got to tell you, limited resources. Now,
you would almost think that we practiced a little bit.
You would almost think so.
Wow,
I know this doesn't happen in Minnesota.
Here we go.
Unlimited resources, unlimited finance.
Yeah.
But I bet everyone listening today, you can't do everything you want because you have limited resources. Might be staff that's limited. It might be, textbooks, curriculum. It might be computers. It might be time's a good one, and finances. And Brad, as a principal, how have you overcome limited resources and finances? What are some ways?
Yep, I think you need to leverage what you have in the most child-centered way that you can. And when we're investing the dollars and the time that we do have in a pedagogically precise manner, in a way where we feel really good about it, then we can be, I don't know if happy with what we have is the right word, but we'll be confident that the investment is doing what it needs to do. A strategy that we've used at our school, a couple of years ago, we started a line item in the budget for innovation. So it's just and it's a modest amount. It's not like we're talking, a ton of money, but it's a placeholder and a priority. Instead of waiting till the end of the year and seeing if we have carryover to try something new, it's there. And here's the difference. That question that Jeff shared earlier, what about people who say, it's the way we've always done it? I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess most school leaders roll their budgets over from year to year. So I'll just speak for myself here. I get my dollars or my budget for next year. If it's more than what it was the previous year, I'll find a way to spend that. If it's less, I'll look for areas to cut. Otherwise, it just stays the same, right? So we could be programming and funding for how school worked 20 years ago or even much longer. This line item in the budget for innovation is our way of saying, let's put the brakes on and be really purposeful and make sure that we're prioritizing it. Super quick evolution to that, Bill, is people have to come to you for those budget requests. We actually, the year after, turned it around and then we said, by the way, this money's here. Let's make a difference for kids and follow our strategic directions and district vision. And now we do one-sentence grants, and people put literally in one sentence say, here's what I'm hoping to do for kids. And we tap into that budget in that way too. So it's been a really reciprocal, dynamic process. And that way we're using our limited resources, but we can feel really good that it's not just a status quo reboot each and every year.
Yeah, one of the things we do is, like you said, when I was, for so many years as principal, I would just use that budget over again, just like you said. But recently, since I've been here at the high school, we developed a leadership team. And this leadership team is a team of about 12 teachers, counselor, and the principals. And what I do is I say to them, listen, this is the amount of money we have. What do we need? How do we meet our goals? How do we move students forward? And then the leadership team actually decides the budgeting and where it goes. And we really try to make it a collaborative process. The other thing, I think, Brad, that is really important to leverage, and that is the community and corporations. So at our school, we opened up sponsorships. This was like you would have thought we were like, asking to bring in like craziness here, but there was some resistance to this in the beginning. But after people saw that, listen, if we name our stadium or we name our auditorium this, we're going to get a ton of money. So we named our stadium after our local credit union, and we get I think it's like $20,000 a year over 3 years. It's crazy what we get. And, they're excited to come in and be part of it. And they want to do some really cool things with our kids. And they've done a Shark Tank here where they fund some things. So we really lean on a few things. Number one, corporations, because we don't have all the funds we want. Our district does a great job with money management, but we want our students want more, need more. So corporations, we go out and reach out to them for sponsorships and other things. The other one is we have an education foundation. Do you have one, Brad?
We do.
Foundation? Mm-hmm. And they actually sponsor grants for our teachers, and they do a phenomenal job of just like giving a $1,000 grant to a teacher. The other thing is donorschoose.org. Check it out. So donorschoose.org, what you can do is put a project in there, and actually they work to get it funded. And all of our programs that we put in the Donors Choose, every single one of them got funded. So it's a powerful way if you're not familiar with it. Have you ever used Donors Choose, Brad?
We have. Our first 3D printer, I don't know if it was 5 years ago or what, but it was fully funded through Donors Choose. And we had people, of course, from our community donating, but just friends on Twitter from across the country were donating. And it was amazing. I mean, how cool is that? I would say, I guess, I don't know if this is pushback, Bill, or just to challenge a little bit. I always like to focus on what we really have control over. And I know we can do the grant thing, but also I would challenge us to use the time and people to really invest in people and mindset. And when those things, because those are free in some respects, when the pedagogy is sound, everything else will flow. You can add money into a pedagogy that isn't currently serving kids, and then you just have a more expensive, antiquated structure. But if you're really changing the hearts and minds of people through leadership and conversations about how we want kids to learn, what we want kids to learn, who we want them to share their learning with, things tend to take care of themselves and the resources become more clear.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, Brad. And the other piece to this is focusing everything back to your mission and I believe that everybody's mission here is to grow kids, develop children, and really move kids forward toward high achievement in all areas of life. And I think about when we, are we doing what's good for us as staff members, or are we doing what's good for our kids? And I think it's really important to focus on when we identify staffing, curriculum, technology, everything that we're doing, what's best for kids. And that's what we really focus on. And sometimes those are hard decisions because we might be doing something that supports the adults in the school, but doesn't move our students forward. And it's something we need to look at. There's so many challenges going on here, Brad. Like, you think there's another one going on? Any idea what it could be, Brad?
I feel like you might have a slide for us, Bill. Hold on.
Ready to rock it out?
I'm not referencing my notes here.
3, 2, 1. There we go.
Yes.
Equity and culturally responsive teaching.
Hey, guys, before you move on, I have another question. Would you like it now?
Bill, jump the gun.
Jeff.
You jumped the gun, Bill.
All right. As a new leader, who are the key people you think that I should have around me on my side in order to get the rest of the educators in the building to buy into the vision that we're trying to put forward?
Excellent question. I think about when I was a new leader, and I got to admit, I didn't bring a lot of people around me in my first year as being a principal. I thought these guns, I thought I could do it on my own.
Yes.
And what I realized was crash and burn, right? And you can't do it on your own. You got to bring people in. And who I brought in the teacher leaders that are doing great things for kids. I brought in the people that have strong relationships with kids in our community. And I think for me as a principal, I realized I have to create a core leadership team. So that's what I did as a school leader. And we run all of our decisions through that. And it's phenomenal. How about you, Brad?
I just want to see you flex again. That was impressive.
Zeus Apollo, right?
Yeah. So kind of a dual approach. There's value in tapping into your early adapters and people who are just raring to go. We have a core mobile makerspace team who implemented this really cool fleet of mobile makerspace carts that can be checked out just like library books. And that was a team that just planned it from the ground up. And high tech, low tech, no tech, these things can be checked out like library books, as I mentioned. And they're now in every hallway in our school, and classrooms can check them out. So that's one approach, and there's value in it. That's, I think, the obvious one. You have people who are ready for change, or they want to lead it, and empowering them is important. But then what I heard Bill say in between flexes there was tapping into your experienced staff, and oftentimes they'll also be your early adapters and innovators, because age has nothing to do with that. But there is value in, even if someone might be, whether they're resistant or very thoughtful and purposeful or intentional, double checking with them. And remember what I said earlier, making sure they see or they understand that you value them and their opinion. It doesn't just have to be their idea, but running things by them. Oftentimes pushback, and even if it's not pushback, but just their thoughtful questions will help clear the way as you're trying to lead change with and alongside your staff. Just by checking with someone who's not an early adopter, maybe even checking with a resistor, it'd be pretty, it's a quick way to turn the tables and just have it be, not to be cliche, but really all for kids, because everyone's involved in the decision making. We're going forward, but it's everyone. It's not just half the staff.
I think the other thing, Brad, is to listen, right? As a school leader, when I became a young school leader 20 years ago, I thought I had all the great ideas, and everybody was just going to listen to them.
Bill, that flexing was not a good idea. I'm just going to.
That was not a good idea. I would agree with that.
I'm just kidding. It was brilliant.
And listening as a school leader has become one of my greatest tools. Mm-hmm. And when I can just sit back and listen and suspend judgment, that's another thing I like to do, is because we are quick to talk and act. We're also quick to make a judgment. And what I've really worked to do through my own personal coaching is to suspend judgment. It's just to wait and listen and be thoughtful about my response. But I think it's about developing leaders in your building. I think it's about connecting with people that have the organizational trust of the faculty and the staff. And it's also about really listening. I think there's some other key players that bring in our students. Why not get students involved? Why not listen to students? Why not connect? What we do at our school is every Friday we do what's called the Falcon Feedback. It's a student forum where we bring together 16 random students and we ask them 4 questions. What does Pottsgrove do great? What can Pottsgrove improve on? What do you dream Pottsgrove can be? And what can you personally do to make Pottsgrove a better place? And I got to tell you, we've seen some awesome things. Like we're getting 2 microwaves in our cafeteria because of that. We would put a salad bar in our cafeteria because of that. And just listening to people is so key. And, I think, Brad, we got to move to this next one, but I love that question.
Can I segue based on what I just heard you say, Bill, and the student voice thing? That's actually a litmus test for how we look at equity and culturally mainly equity in our school. So regardless of the event or activity, we look at it through kind of that student piece, where is what I'm seeing right now representative of our community and our kiddos in our school? And if there's a disconnect, we have a really cool 5th grade graduation ceremony coming up, and we have got some past Greenwood alum coming, some boys that are speaking. We've got a middle school kiddo coming to sing the national anthem. We've got some current students coming, and what I'm most proud of is the rich diversity in talent, interest, gender, culture that's going to be present on the stage and the student voice. So it's a testament to our team and what we care about. We want all kids to see themselves in every aspect, our communications, graduation speeches, etc. So that was the tie-in. I don't know how clear or unclear that was. How about you, Bill?
And Brad, I think you're intentional in that. And as school leaders, we have to be intentional in making sure that all students are represented in our school. If you want to talk about equity and you want to see whether there's equity in your school, walk into an honors class, walk into a high-level class, and look, does it represent the demographics in your school? Do the speakers that you bring out for assemblies, does your curriculum talk about, represent various cultures? We've been playing around and toying around doing a course called Not Your Dead White Guys Literature. And really thinking about what does literature look like? What does our curriculum look like? And modeling after our culture. We are, in my community, we're one of the more diverse schools in our community, and we're growing. And that's what makes us rich. I think it's that diversity that we celebrate and that we love. But it's one that when I walk into an honors class, I want to see the same representation, if not more, of a diverse population.
But then you got to take that deeper. If it's not there, and it doesn't have to be an honors class, it could be the media center and your book collection and the songs that are sung, etc. I think the key for your innovative school leaders is when that's not there, how are you going to lead change and lead the conversation or create the culture that expects more and makes it happen for kids?
Yeah, it's also about, changing the expectations of teachers and really having teachers focus on this. And I know as a school leader, when you see that not happening, it's about having conversations with our guidance counselors. Are we intentionally looking after what students can we challenge and encourage them to get involved in that? The other thing is we're putting supports into place for kids that, really need it. And I think as a school, we really need to focus on diversity. Here's the other thing. I think we live in a world today that is shaken by the media and the politics with this. I want every single kid. I want every religion, every nationality, every ethnicity to come to school and feel supported and cared for. And it's important. We're looking at next year putting out a survey to our kids, asking them, do you have a teacher in your school? Is there a teacher in this school that you believes in you and that you can go and connect with? Because if they don't, then we want to make sure we provide that for them, because I think this equity and culture piece is so big.
And that's actionable. A survey, every listener can do that. I heard you say conversation too, Bill. Everyone listening can just start a conversation. You don't have to have the answer. You just have to have the ears and the heart to listen. A trusted staff member several years ago had a conversation with me in the hallway. She's like, "Can I tell you something?" I'm like, "Sure." And she was just noticing the art that was hanging up, and it had never occurred to me, but it really represented and catered to just a portion of our student body. And the kids who didn't fit that demographic, I mean, it was very forced. The supplies just didn't, like even the skin tones. You give kids certain color crayons and paper and things like that. When you really start to think about the level of belonging or not belonging that happens as a result, that can have a cumulative effect on a kiddo. So if they never see themselves in their art and in their books and in their speakers, that's a problem. I mentioned this in Renegade Leadership, but one of the things we did after that was we bought a rich array of skin tone construction paper and markers, just so when kids are coloring, regardless of where they are in the rainbow of tans and browns, they can see themselves and celebrate that. We recently had an author, and we've done this now for the past couple of years, but making sure that all of our kids can see themselves in our author visits. And wouldn't you know it, I have some writing hanging on my whiteboard now. I have budding authors now from every demographic in our school bringing me their writing. And isn't it a coincidence that happens after they see themselves in their speakers? Because that didn't happen before. They just feel like they're inspired. It's cool.
Brad, I love how you get the construction paper that resembles them. Think about your nurse's office. What color are the Band-Aids in your nurse's office, right? They're probably white, and that's a small thing, but it's a thing to look at. The other thing we do is we strategically schedule assemblies and activities throughout the year that celebrate students' diversity, so they can see, leaders in our community that look and resemble just like them. Mm-hmm. We make sure that up on the graduation stage that there are students that resemble them, that look like them. And I think every kid, I would encourage you to think about this next year. Do a survey and ask kids, do they have a teacher or an adult in the school that they believe they can connect with, they believe trusts in them, believes in them, and cares for them? The other piece of this, it's not just an equity and culturally responsive, it's a school safety thing. And I think when we look at issues, school safety is another factor. And we want every kid in our school to be connected to a caring, trusting adult that they know they can go to.
And the schools also are in the core business of learning. So I want to hit on culturally responsive teaching and leadership really quick.
I have a question about that as well. Would you like it now?
Yeah, bring the heat, baby.
All right. So with everything going on right now, keeping kids safe in school is top of mind for many people. What do you think are solutions as it pertains to culturally responsive teaching?
Yeah, let me say this one. I think the first thing is we have to, as principals and school leaders, we got to get out in front of this. We cannot sit on the sidelines anymore. School safety is the number one priority. When we think about more children and people have died in schools this year than in combat in our military, that is unbelievable that that's happening. And here's what I would say. One of the things we put out is I put out a video. Number one, I put out a video message to our students, and I told them, listen, if you hear anything, see anything sketchy, concerning, or dark, report it. We put out communications to our staff, to our community. But the other piece to this is to provide a safe, caring, nurturing environment for our kids. We realize that we work to support all students. For example, we have a super group, which is our GS, Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education at Gustafson group here in our school. And we realize that these are the students that are often bullied and harassed. And when I connect with them and I let them know, hey, listen, I care about you as a principal. I'm here to support you. And if you're being bullied, I need to know about it. But when we talk about school safety, it's about getting everybody involved. It needs to be a community effort. It needs to be a community culture in the school as we work to make every kid feel connected and part of something. Brad, what do you think? I mean,
well, I'll separate a little bit from, I want to hit on culturally responsive teaching. And I think when you include all kids and they're engaged and honored, I think that probably will translate to what Jeff was asking about too. But in like from a leadership perspective, Zaretta Hammond has some neuroscience research. It's just fascinating. It's very pragmatic. And it's stuff that we can all do. Like some kids come from backgrounds of rich storytelling. I mean, you may give them a worksheet and they're just not going to be as interested as if you tell them a story and they know they're loved and you can relate to them. They will remember that touch in that story forever. So just having conversations and modeling at staff meetings, storytelling, because that can be a really powerful instructional technique too. And how does that relate? Well, obviously that's culturally responsive teaching and there's brain science behind it too, but I think it does tie into what Jeff asked a little bit, because if we're really cognizant with how kids are learning, instead of viewing different kids as being whatever the profile of a school shooter and thing is, you know, the loner or the person who was bullied or the person you just didn't expect, all these different things. There are so many different MOs, but if we're teaching in a way that really honors who is in front of us instead of just us as educators, you know, I prefer to X, Y, and Z, lecture, do whatever. If we're really looking at how kids learn, that's a step in the right direction.
Jeff, any other questions out there?
No, right now we're fine.
Awesome. Bill, I'm scared. I'm scared for the next barrier.
Hear the drum roll. Are you ready?
Dun, 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 dun. Oh,
that's because you are afraid of failure, Dr. Gustafson. Bring it, Brad.
Unbelievable. Aren't we all?
We are all.
To some degree, if you're being honest.
Listen, I'm from Philly. We were used to failing until this year.
So what is it about fear? Bill, is your mic still good?
I think.
Yeah, okay, you're good. You're good. Just had to make sure. Yeah, what is it about fear of failure that is a legitimate thing? Because I hear this a lot, and if I'll just be completely honest, I'll just own it. I will experiment and try new things often. Call it innovation, call it what you want. But I feel at home here with the people I'm with and serving. If it's a more public venue, I do worry a little bit about perception and being judged and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not that drives me, but I'm just saying I'm aware of it. It speaks to the importance of culture. But what is it about that fear? I feel it's like when someone doesn't know you or they're going to judge you or steal your narrative and story. I don't like that, and that's kind of a perilous position. And quite honestly, a lot of the people we're leading may feel that same fear of us, right? When we walk in to do an observation or just cruise down the hallway, we may be setting them up for some of those same feelings.
Yeah, I remember it takes me back to presenting in front of a faculty for one of my first times as a principal. And
did you go like this?
Oh, 1, 2, right?
No.
and I remember having everything. I like to have everything mapped out beforehand, organized and ready to go. And guess what? I flopped. It failed right in front of them. And I expected the technology that I expect them to use. It didn't work for me, and I was fumbling. And, you know, I just said to them, I said, listen, this is a great example that as educators, we need to think on our feet. And, you know, I got to tell you, that bothered me for a while that I dropped the ball on the technology went down, but we also use it as a teaching tool. And I think the other piece for me is, I have the fear of failure of like, I run a high school of over 1,000 students, and I don't ever want to miss something that's going to harm a kid or hurt a kid. And, you know, I think about this school safety thing right now. And I know as a school leader, for me, it's probably at the forefront of my thinking and our thinking as a school, being in a high school. And I don't want to miss anything. I guess my fear of failure is that we're gonna miss something, and we work so hard not to do that. The other piece to it, I think, is
Bill. Let me quick ask for people who might be listening and want. I'm guessing we kind of all want the same thing. How do we create what you're talking about and alleviate or mitigate that fear of failure so that people are willing to step out and try something new?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's about modeling. I need to model that I'm willing to fail, and failure is all right. We need to almost build a culture of failure. You know, I think back to failure's not an option. Where's that from? That's the movie. Come on, Brad. Come on now. Failure's not an option.
It sounds like
Apollo 13, where they throw everything on the table and they yell, failure's not an option. I think failure is more than an option. I think it's an opportunity. And I think it's an opportunity for us as school leaders to really build on and teach others that, hey, listen, when we fail, we move on. The other piece is we need to be transparent with our fellow teachers and our community. And we let her, hey, there's nothing wrong with apologizing. I remember an educator, when I first became one, they said, listen, you don't ever say you're sorry. Because
somebody said that?
Oh, yes, because they said to me, that proved you made a mistake. And I was sitting there like, oh, my goodness. And what I realized was, I think the biggest person says they're sorry. I think the biggest leader says, hey, listen, I failed this. And I'm sorry, I apologize. Let's move forward. But I think also create a culture of failure where failure is, you know what, you're trying, you're experimenting, you're moving forward.
I got to make a quick connection, Bill, to what you just said with the sorry thing, because I'm just thinking about what I can actually do to support this. In addition to modeling, it's when people fail, making it really safe and being super open to saying, no, great effort. What did we learn? How can I support next time? So that, because if they feel comfortable saying sorry, but then they get stymied or judged or somehow feel repercussions from us, either direct or indirect, it's just a wash, and it's a detriment to kids. So I'm listening, Bill. I'm taking notes here.
This reminds me of another one. One thing I love about our teachers is our teachers work every day to give their best. I'm sure that's true in your school, right, Brad?
Oh, yeah.
And I remember just recently, I went in and observed. I was observing a teacher, just doing a walkthrough, stopped in and observed this teacher, and this lesson flopped. And, I encouraged the teacher. The teacher came up to me afterwards and, Dr. Z, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it to go this way. And nothing, you know what? Technology didn't work. And I just, hey, listen, that's how we grow. This is how we develop. This is how we move forward. And I think we need to culture as school leaders by modeling it and by supporting someone to take a risk, try something new, try something brave. You may crash and burn, but sometimes some of the crash and burns are the best things to get around and warm your hands and use that fire to motivate to move to the next level.
Right. And I take this as a call to action for everyone listening, Bill, if there's anyone left, just kidding. We have got to model failure, because if our teachers don't see us failing really and owning it and trying things that are hard enough where failure is actually possible, right? If we just play it safe or just innovate around the edges, how are they going to feel safe failing and taking big steps in front of their kids? Because ultimately it is about the kids, and their kids need to see their teachers fail, quite honestly, on a regular basis, because that's how they learn humility and risk-taking and collaboration and problem-solving and iterating, right? If it's just a sterile, perfect environment, none of that happens. And I do believe that it doesn't have to start with leadership, because you will have amazing teachers who do it from the ground up in spite of their leaders, which is a really sad thing if it has to happen that way. But when we can lead it and help create the culture, it's this amazing trickle-down effect. And I think it actually kind of leads into our next slide, if I'm not wrong, Bill.
Yeah, it does. Are we ready for the next one?
Should we do this?
Hey, Jeff, any questions before we move on?
Because once Bill starts now, he's not stopping.
I am not pulling back. No questions.
Was that a half flex, Bill?
That was a half flex right there. Bring it. School culture barriers.
School, right. So what does this mean, Bill?
I think that one of the things we talk about in NASSP building ranks is all about developing culture. And what are some of the school barriers? And one of them is people being resistant to change, resistant to growth, resistant to moving forward. And Brad, what can we do as school leaders when someone comes, that becomes a barrier to school leaders? And what are some school culture barriers that you see out there?
Right. So culture itself is like water, right? And we're in it, and we don't necessarily see it or feel it, although there are times that it becomes visible. When the water or the environment or culture is conducive to innovation and risk-taking and all these things that we're talking about, and I can just speak from seeing the people that I serve every single day. This is a very special thing that they've created, and I get to be a teeny little part of it, but I attribute it to culture. And it starts out probably like silos, and that might be like you and me in our first year as a principal. We might have gone at it kind of Lone Ranger-y or thinking we could do it all, and it just doesn't work. In the silo, nothing much happens. But when we can connect with people in a professional learning network, bounce ideas, iterate, share, these silos are multiplied and they become cities, and sooner or later that's your culture. And it's a really special thing. So then when people come in, they bring, new hires and such, they bring their gifts, and we emulate and shine the light on those, but then we also lift them up and kind of acclimate them to. It's a really special thing. But culture is that invisible thing where if leaders aren't tending to it, it can be really, really dangerous. So my biggest actionable thing is keep your innovation radar up, keep your relational radar up. And when you see threats to innovation, when you see threats to relationships, whether it's staff on staff, staff on students, staff on parents, whatever that threat is, you have a couple choices. You can address it with dignity and grace and respect and courage, or for whatever reason, you can let it slide and circle back to it later, or ignore it, or just hope it was an anomaly. And I know what the right thing to do is for kids in that scenario.
Yeah, Brad, it makes me think of what I call courageous conversations.
Mm-hmm.
It takes courage to have school culture that's student-centered, focused on kids. And sometimes those conversations can be hard. They can be tough.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to talk to somebody, because it's going to upset the apple cart or it's going to do something. But having those courageous conversations is really important. And what I would encourage you to do, those actionable items, number one, do it now. Don't put it off. Don't wait. Don't think it's just going to naturally get better, because typically it doesn't. So I would do it now. Number two, when you're having that courageous conversation, stick to the facts. Only talk about the facts. Sometimes when we put opinions in there and we get heated with our emotions, it becomes so much bigger than it needs to be. I think the other piece is to stay on mission, to really stay focused on the mission and what the mission is of the school and the culture and what you're trying to do as a school leader in a school community. And then I think lastly is not to take it personal, because see it as this is professional. This is, you need to do this. But actually my last piece of this is to continue to treat that person, just like we said, as one of your best employees.
Yes.
And don't shy away from them. But, a school culture, I'm thinking of a school right now, actually, thankfully not in this school. Our faculty and staff here, they're amazing people that love kids and work really hard every day. And, there's a school nearby where they recently got a new principal. And I said to the principal, I had a conversation with him over the weekend as I was mentoring them. I said, listen, you can feel the change, the positive change in that school in a heartbeat. And it's because I believe that school culture is reflective of the school leader.
Mm-hmm.
And the attitudes that you bring to the school, Brad, and that I bring every day, that is going to make or break. If you bring these babies every single day, Brad, it's going to work, baby. Come on now, Brad. And that's what it's about. It's about coming with energy. It's about coming with excitement.
What you permit, you condone. I've heard somebody way smarter than me say that.
I love that.
So true. Hey, in Renegade Leadership, I think it's in chapter 10, I talk about 10% type conversations. And I got this from a school leader in California. He used to be a baseball umpire. And he said, anybody can umpire 90% of a baseball game, right? And maybe that's true in school leadership. Anybody can do 90% of what we do. There's 10% of what we would do that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. And that's where our kids and our staff need us to be courageous and dialed in and enter into these conversations as learners and humble, but with courage. One of the actionable tricks, I don't know if it's a trick, but a tip I give in the book is sometimes before I go into one of these difficult conversations, I'll kind of write down some notes on my computer in the form of a recap email. So before I've had the conversation, I'm recapping it, and it holds me accountable. I don't send it yet. It holds me accountable for what I know our kids are counting on me to ask that person about. And I don't go in to assume I knew what they were thinking. I just go in to seek to understand and walk away with some shared agreements and things like that. And then I change the email as needed so it reflects our actual conversation. And I send it. I don't do this a lot, but just when it's really important that there's clarity and they know the staff member knows I'm on their side, but that we're together, we're on the side for kids. And if we need to realize change together, that it's just in black and white. And that way, if I miscommunicate something or if I misheard it, we can have that conversation. But that holds me accountable. There's clarity for them, and it has seemed to work really well, probably because I do what you say, Bill. And that's after you have that conversation, then it's just in support mode. You follow up, you treat them, like you love them, you care about them, you want them to succeed. And that's how it works. That's how the world goes around.
Yeah, Brad, I think you bring up a great point. It made me think about, we've always done it that way. That's probably the biggest killer to school culture, right? That attitude that we've always done it this way. Because what can happen is you permeate through the years things that are not supportive of kids, or they may have been supportive of kids 10 years ago, but they're not supportive of kids now. And if we keep doing things like we used to do, we're not going to be able to meet the needs of kids today. And I think as school leaders, we have a responsibility to shatter that we always did it this way, to shatter the status quo, and to move forward what it's going to take to do great things for kids. And that takes courage. And here's what I would tell school leaders right off the bat. Don't do it alone. Brad and I want you to know there's Brad and I are here to support you, but there's tons of school leaders out there on Twitter and social media. I find energy and excitement by connecting with other school leaders. Get connected and learn. So don't do this alone. I think the other piece is to become part of a professional learning network. For me, that's been so important moving forward and growing as a school leader. Some of the most important things that you can do.
Hey, Bill.
Questions out there?
Yeah, put the gloves back on. Nice. Put them on. Let's Jeff, give us some questions here.
I have a question for you. Somebody asked, as a principal, what are you doing to recruit more teachers of color in the schools? How do you approach that, and what are you doing?
Yeah, I think first thing that, we're really, we got some really great hires this year that we're very excited about that reflect our student body. And one of the things that we did was, number one, we're intentional about it. We go out and we look for faculty members that reflect our student body. And we're not perfect. We need to grow in this area. The other thing we've been doing is we've been going to job fairs in areas that have demographics that reflect our students and really going out. And then the other piece is to really intentionally go after this and support this. What do you find, Brad?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot to that question, and I think it starts before you have a job posting, right? I think really with everything you do, but a couple tangible, actionable things. Our school has an equity team. It's more of, I don't know if ad hoc is the right word. It's just an optional team that gets together. And it's actually our most highly attended committee. And I'm really proud and inspired by the teacher leaders who lead that, and conversations flow from that, and they help us realize real actual change for kids. But many of the teachers who are serving on the equity team are also part of the hiring process or part of the interview teams. And I feel like the lens they bring and we're trying to bring to all conversations during interviews is a really important lens, so that as we're listening to candidates in their responses and in their background experiences, we can understand kind of the depth of their heart and their experience in supporting all of our kiddos. So
the other thing we do, Brad, is we try to connect with universities in the city. We have a number of really great universities that are putting out amazing students, and we actually tap into them and see, if they have candidates that they think would be great for our school. And we really intentionally go out after that, putting job fairs in areas that would draw that demographic, and really just building connections and relationships and expanding that network. It comes back to that network we talk about also. That's another key piece to bringing in teachers that reflect. Use the network that your teachers have, that your staff members have. Ask around, do you know people? And I think it's a good way. Any other questions out there, Jeff?
No, right now we're all set. Dun, 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 dun. That's all we got.
Well, let me say this, Brad. Here's the other thing. I think probably the most pressing issue, at least at the high school level, and I'm sure it's across the board, is school safety. And I think the number one thing that we can do as school leaders is to continue staying in it, continue staying focused, building culture, doing these things, and really being vigilant. I got to tell you, as a high school principal, I'm really sensitive to this. I'm really passionate about it, and we need to listen to people. We bring in our local law enforcement. We do a monthly meeting with our law enforcement where we talk about students at risk and what students need support and how we can help students. We meet with our district attorney's office, and we're doing our school safety drills. It's interesting. We've changed we do fire drills every month. Think about this. Every school in America does fire drills every month. When was the last time someone died of a fire in a school? I think it was in the 1950s. Not discounting that, but why aren't we doing safety drills for active shooters in schools on a regular basis? Something we're committing to as a school next year is to do just that, to really move forward and be planning monthly activities and strategies with students. but it's also about being out there, building relationships, and having your ear to the ground.
We actually have a state law bill where we have, I think, 5 of those type of drills we have to do every year. So,
that's awesome.
Hey, I think I speak for Bill and the entire Corwin team on this one, and maybe even Walden too. Wow, I'm big shoes here. This is not intended to be the answer. This is just a conversation starter, a continuation of a lot of great work and thinking that's happened in education. So please do include Bill and I in future communication and questions, and we'd love to learn from you. Bill, I know Nicole has a grand finale for everyone, but
Bring it, Nicole. Bring the grand
always
finale.
great to connect with you, my friend. All right, Nicole.
I don't know if I have the gloves that you guys have, but I will hold up the sign.
Don't make Bill start flexing again.
Hey, that's right.
I will hold up the sign at the end and say, cheers to both of you. I think it was a draw, and I don't think we necessarily have a winner except for all the participants that got to join and listen to the two of you really face off on these issues that, for me, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do about these things. I hope these two guys do. So I know that the participants really gained a lot of excellent tips. I was actively tweeting and posting to LinkedIn as well. So if you follow Corwin Press and you follow Dr. Brad Gustafson and Dr. Bill Ziegler, you will find those same tweets that recap some of the major points and top tips on the toughest issues in education that they presented. If you could, I think, Bill, if you could advance to the next slide, I just want to make sure that we end with how you can learn more, because what you heard today is just a snippet of the kinds of tools and resources that Brad and Bill have put together for school leaders. You can read more, you can get tips that are really apply to all of these situations because these authors are actually in practice right now. They understand the challenges of the role, and as you heard me in the introduction, they are award-winning, and so we can say that they're doing it right. In their books, Future Focused Leaders by Bill Ziegler and Dave Rampage, and Renegade Leadership by Brad Gustafson, you can find out more. We give you a link there. Go to corwin.com. We do actually have a bundle offer where you can buy both of these books at the same time. By attending the webinar, you also receive a discount. So participants who joined today, as well as those of you who registered, will receive the link to this recording, as well as the PowerPoint that was shared and the discount code to order the books if you'd like to read more. Again, please engage with the authors online. Please engage with us at Corwin Press. We'd like to thank Walden University and the Walden University students who joined our webinar, our fantastic In the Ring webinar for, today. To learn more about Walden's courses and services, please visit walden.edu. And with that, I will say good evening to all, and we hope that you enjoy a very nice Memorial Day weekend coming up and a wonderful end to the school year.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.